The following is rated not safe for work. It contains strong language, adult situations, and lots of spoilers. Discretion is advised.
In the criminal justice system, cinematic-based offenses are considered especially heinous. The dedicated attorneys who investigate these villainous films are members of an elite squad known as the Reels of Justice. These are their stories.
Order, please, order. The Reels of Justice is now in session. Judge Dylan D. Defense presiding. Will you all rise for the Honorable Judge Dylan D. Defense?
Be seated. Welcome to the Reels of Justice. Today we are hearing the case of The People vs. Tusk, a 2014 Kevin Smith feature about a deranged serial killer who surgically alters an abrasive podcast host in hopes of turning him into a walrus. For those of you unfamiliar with our court's proceedings, we are here to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. As always in this courtroom, films are to be considered excellent until proven awful, and the burden of proof lies upon the prosecution to prove beyond a shadow of a reasonable doubt that this film is guilty. Mr. Howard, you are appearing on behalf of the prosecution. You may begin your opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. In 2011, filmmaker Kevin Smith lured prospective buyers of his controversial film Red State to its Sundance premiere, only to announce that he would be self-distributing the film. This move, of course, created great upset, but was in keeping with his clown prince of indie film persona. Throughout his career, Smith has taken pleasure in pushing people to the ledge of comfort and turning their plummet into his punchline. Later that year, Smith would announce his retirement from feature filmmaking.
Woo!
2 years later, the joke was again on us, this time in the form of the smug, insidious body horror comedy Tusk, teasing us with a promising satirical premise, strong performances, and an assured build of tension. Tusk collapses under a contempt for its characters and audience and has us watching his work as we would a loudmouth kid with firecrackers, waiting for him to unceremoniously blow off his genitals. Predictably, the blowback is not worth the payoff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Mr. Rodriguez, you are representing the defense. Please present your opening statement.
Cinema is an inherently subjective medium. In Kevin Smith's own words, someone could watch Tusk and say, "This is the greatest film ever made," to which he would reply, "Isn't it?" Or they could say, "This is the worst piece of shit I've ever seen," to which he would also reply, "Isn't it?" Tusk is neither of those hyperbolic declarations. I have long maintained that the classification of bad movie, or at least not a bad movie, is, in actuality, a sliding scale that depends on how you, the individual viewer, react. I believe a truly bad movie is something that slides off the brain as it's being viewed, something that bores me, or inspires no discussion afterward. Tusk is not that movie. It's genuinely interesting and original, whether for the right or wrong reasons. For instance, the shift between body horror and absurd comedy sometimes occurs in the span of a single line of dialogue, which could be misconstrued as atonal. Noted acquitted manslaughterer John Landis once said, "Critics kill you if you fuck with genre." And while that might not be the only reason that Kevin Smith was crucified for making this film, it certainly is a factor. I'm not here to argue that Tusk is great, or even very good. I'm here to argue that it has enough interesting components, enough value, to avoid being convicted as a bad movie. Kevin Smith has always been a deeply polarizing filmmaker. His very worst films not without their relative strengths, his very best films not without their glaring deficiencies, usually in the visual department. But in Tusk, he has somehow made something that is unmistakably his without falling prey to his traditional trappings of directorial laziness. It may be about someone who becomes a better man by becoming a walrus, but it actually looks and feels like a real movie, which is practically a foreign concept for the man, and that I can get behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Prosecution, you may proceed with your first exhibit.
All right. So in this film, Kevin Smith has given us many themes, primarily those about his subject, over time having given up his humanity, symbolically, and then having it stripped away from him literally. We can allow that, but the problem with the film is that it presents us with a character who is completely unsympathetic. And then over the course of the film, we have to be on this character's side or someone's side in order to justify watching his slow dismantling, his slow loss of humanity. We present a character who is completely unsympathetic, and therefore his loss of humanity over the course of the film is uncompelling because we already have started at zero.
Mr. Galen, can you give us a little bit of background on this main character that you're talking about, the Justin Long's character?
Yes. Justin Long, or Wallace, is presented at the beginning of the film as a sort of shock jock / exploitation podcaster. And in the beginning, he is sauntering out to seek an interview with a character known as the Kill Bill Kid, which is an iteration of the Star Wars Kid YouTube viral sensation, and so
sensation.
It was a sensation. It was a thing. It was a thing that happened in the world. Take it what you will. But
I believe the kids would say it went viral.
Yes, it went viral. We'll just leave it at that. People watched it. More people than probably should. Anyway, so at that point, we're seeing him and his friend, played by Haley Joel Osment, and their banter back and forth, basically making a spectacle of this person. And so from the beginning, we've seen where he is descended to. He makes he takes joy and financial gain from reveling in the downfall of other people. And then later on, that downfall is voiced in his girlfriend, played by Genesis Rodriguez, and so we see there is at one point a shroud of a good person, with little tack-ons like, oh, you cried at Winnie the Pooh, blah blah blah, and so there is no tragedy of a person. There is no kind of accidental tourist, someone who's buried his soul and has it resurface. There's none of that. There's no real point in watching this character. He basically then goes out to the far reaches of Canada and to seek out this Kill Bill Kid, only to find out that he has, because of his words over the air, ceremoniously committed suicide by sword, what we presume a harikiri or such. And he has a quick moment of realization, then an irritation and rage that the guy couldn't have waited long enough for his interview, and then he's going out to search for a new subject, and he finds him in Michael Park's character, played by Michael Park's character known as Howard Howe.
Now, I think it's you bring up an interesting point. So he is. I do agree with you partially that he is pretty much he's borderline unsympathetic to the point of derision, to the point of asking, what about this person should I connect with whatsoever? But I think what the movie is doing in kind of a subversive way is that it puts the emotional emphasis on the character of his girlfriend, the aforementioned Genesis Rodriguez, who, even though she acknowledges that he cheats on her and that he is a piece of shit and that he is an opportunist and he has become this kind of, I guess, capitalistic monster, she still sees that he has the ability to be who he once was, the man that she fell in love with. And I think that because she goes to Canada to find him when he goes missing, and she never gives up, no matter how many times she's presented with options that it does not look good. The cops tell them, we have no idea. He didn't check into this hotel. We have no clue. They meet up with a private detective who says, yeah, we found a bunch of bodies. We really don't have anything. But she keeps going because she still thinks she can redeem him somehow. And I ultimately don't think that the movie is trying to say that he is ultimately redeemable for himself. I think that the movie is trying to say that she could redeem him.
Yes, I can see that. But we're given so little of her character. She's only kind of sprinkled in at little moments, and so we don't have enough really to invest in that search. I mean, we're even throughout their search, there's moments where it's more to suggest that he is an inhuman character. He is kind of beyond his own humanity. Even in a throwaway scene when they're driving around looking for him, calling out his name as though he were a lost dog. We're given these little hints to suggest that he is basically an inhuman character, and it doesn't really give us enough to really sympathize in her gain, especially when she is then very quickly moving to the comfort of his friend, who is very kind of opportunistically kind of moving in as the shoulder to cry on, and then ignores his calls when he comes in, pretty much showing that he's already given up on him, and that she is then moving in for his comfort. And so it gives you really, and there's really nothing there to motivate their search, or to really to really give us anything to invest in at that point.
I see what you're saying, but I think ultimately I don't think that necessarily that Kevin Smith is interested in those kind of the macro. I think he's kind of interested in the entire picture, and I think he's trying to get to. It's basically a story about a guy who was once good, who then becomes bad, and is then conditioned to become something subhuman, and then has to be redeemed by the people that he betrayed. And ultimately, at the very, very end, it's her tragedy that she gets him back, and he's a walrus, and that's it. He's not coming back.
He's a walrus.
She has him in her backyard with a beach ball and a pool and a little igloo, and fuck, that's bleak. That is love. It's not going to grow. Yes, he cries at the very end, signifying that maybe he still has some humanity in him. But I think ultimately it's not just the tragedy of he's not going to repair from this. I mean, he has no fucking arms, for God's sake.
Right.
But he's permanently like this. But ultimately it plays on the tragedy of her face, looking at him from the balcony upstairs. And again, I don't think he's really going for the macro details. I think he's going for the big picture. And the big picture is, this is a horror story. And what is more horrifying than that?
I see your point, and I will concede that there are moments like that are compelling, and he teases us like that throughout. And I think ultimately my contempt for the film is rests in the amount of give he allows himself with that teasing, and especially at the end after that. I think there is a compelling moment. I think I will confess ultimately that had he left on that final moment of him in his little igloo, crying, I would be able to at least dismiss the film as like, okay, there are some there's some merits. Maybe it's not for me, but I can focus on the good. But to jump to the final moments, I think what really cemented my rage for this film was them playing the original podcast over the end credits, in which they conceive of this whole premise as a joke, and basically as a way to lure in their audience. They're basically stooping to the same level as their own podcasters, making it this meta moment, and fine, that's great, very clever, fuck you. But what it gives us is this, all that gives us at the end is this idea that, okay, this all the emotional ups and downs we've been through has basically been a pie in the face, and that we're the fools at the end, because this was all just this was all just a farce. This was all just a facade, and none of it matters. None of it means anything. So then, why the fuck did we sit through this unpleasant 103 minutes to begin with? And that really is where my contempt for the film lies. And I think all of the other efforts, everything else, all the little merits that are woven in, the emotional, the emotional components between the characters, anything that we would root in is completely dashed at that point. And at that point, I just, I want to march up on stage at one of his college interviews and just give him a big poke in the gut and be like, and be like, take that, you little Pillsbury doughboy of fucking indie merch. Fuck off.
Order in the court, please, Mr. Howard. Bailiff, restrain him. My goodness.
No, I agree with them, sir. 100%.
Oh, well, fair enough. All right. So actually, Mr. Howard, I think you're touching on a very important point that deserves elaboration. So I think we covered the main character and whether or not you could emotionally attach to him pretty well. Could you get into the genesis of this movie, like you were talking about that podcast at the end of the credits? I feel this is going to be a very important point for the jury to understand.
Yes, this film was generated after during his Smodcast episode, in which he had they had spoken about. This was an actual advertisement that they had seen posted somewhere, that someone had actually seen. Someone was offering free room and board for in exchange someone would wear a walrus suit. And
it turned out to be a hoax, but yeah.
Yes, it did turn out to be a hoax. I think someone they knew had posted it as a hoax, but then they branched off of this idea. What if you actually turn this into a film? And it was this kind of idea of like, this is so ridiculous. I bet we, I dare you to try to make a movie out of this. And that's kind of what this whole thing, has become, is just like, I dare you. Okay, well, let's if we were actually to pin a film on this ridiculous premise, what would it look like? So then the whole episode turned into a discussion trying to extrapolate something from that absurd premise. And then, they were using it as a way to engage their audience, saying like, okay, I think it was like hashtag walrus yes, hashtag walrus no. Should we do this or not?
Yes.
And of course, all of his fans, were kind of bewitched by this idea, and again, it's that kind of, do you dare me to eat eat this rotten sandwich? And of course, everyone's going to say yes. So of course, everyone said yes. Make this ridiculous premise that should never be made, because you're Kevin Smith and you could actually do that shit. And here's like and you can get the money that could feed starving children, and instead make this ridiculous walrus movie. And everyone was like, yes, absolutely. And so it kind of turned into that.
Did anyone in this courtroom vote in this Twitter poll? Do we actually have any? No from the defense. Bailiff, I know you were walrus no quite adamantly. Please continue, Mr. Haggard.
And so again, it was from the beginning, it was sought out to as an audience pleaser. And there's even little bits that are, even little moments throughout that are sort of gimmies for his audience, such as even the little moment in the bathroom when he turns around the little crocheted doll thing, and because he's creeped out by it. Apparently that's from his podcast. And or there was the line that the cop has about puts the BM in the PM. That was a line that people voted on. So so it's generated by this whole kind of audience participation, sort of adding wood to the fire kind of fervor throughout that is supposedly justifying this movie, which again is there to please a very specific audience, but kind of leaves leaves your average viewer just kind of perplexed.
And that's
So
where at the end during the credits where he's explaining the end of the movie and laughing, you're saying that's where you really take umbrage with it.
Absolutely, because then for all of the moments that are compelling, at every moment that we've been that we have maybe side with the character or with his girlfriend's character, at all of the discomfort that we've endured, all of that has been a joke, and basically a joke at our expense.
So, about its origins, when the movie was financed after this marijuana-soaked improv session, the $3 million that went to the budget were not going to go to fund starving children. It was funded by William Morris Endeavor. It was going to fund movies, probably a reboot or a sequel or a remake or a combination of the three. It would have been something that you've seen a million times before. People talk about how there are no more original ideas in Hollywood, about how everything is either a sequel, a remake, or a reboot. Then, when somebody makes a movie like Tusk, no matter how it came about, no matter what it was inspired by, no matter who it's intended for, it's none of those things. It's entirely its own fascinating thing. Whether it's for you or not, it is fascinating. And then they complain. It's inadvisable, but inadvisable is exciting. Inadvisable is cinematic. The Long Goodbye by Robert Altman is inadvisable. It's a terrible adaptation of a great book. But you know what? It's a great fucking movie.
Okay, I think to compare it to something like The Long Goodbye, which is a very specific deviation of a form, is completely off base, because that film at least has respect for its audience. It's giving them a different flavor of, and it is breaking rules, but it's giving them a different flavor and a different take on a specific form. Whereas this has absolutely no respect for its audience. It's it strings us along and then drops us off a cliff, and it's not respectful of the dramatic form. I think ultimately it's irresponsible on the director's part to take us on this ride and to then completely drop all form, to set up these very to set up a very compelling premise, to give us very interesting characters, and a bravura performance by Michael Parks, and then to basically at the end just drop all of that and say nah, just kidding.
I think every point you just made is valid, but I also think that every single point was entirely his intention. I also think that he was entirely respectful of the audience that saw the Walrus Yes hashtag and said, that sounds fucked up. I want to watch that. That's totally the kind of person that would love this movie. This movie is so weird and fucked up, so wrong and misshapen in the right places, that it is entirely... It's not like a balloon animal where it's contorted and everything to fit the market. It is contorted in a way that fits Kevin Smith's weird marijuana-soaked brain. And that is the kind of movie that these people want. And so if that doesn't appeal to the dramatic form, I don't think he really cares about that. And while I know that we probably should care about that, I don't know that we actually have to.
I agree. We don't. I mean, we don't have to do anything, but I think we don't have to put any standards on the dramatic form. The dramatic form can ultimately, we've seen many times, can be whatever we want it to be. But I think there is still a responsibility to the on the director's part to his audience. And yes, there are certainly those who are going to say who will have voted Walrus yes just to see how far that goes and how far you can push that extreme. But I don't. But I think there's a certain point you lose. You lose respect to the storytelling form, and it becomes completely all about shock. It doesn't become about telling a compelling story. You can set up all of the rules and then just dash them away at the end because you have this ridiculous premise. And I think that's not an example that we should be setting forth.
That's a very interesting point about the origins of the movie. Mr. Rodriguez, would you like to respond any more
No,
to
I think that the arguments are entirely valid and they're structurally sound, but I also, again, I think that it is entirely within Kevin Smith's wheelhouse to be intentionally breaking these rules, to be breaking these forms.
Well, I hope you think that. We wouldn't have much of an episode without it. Mr. Howard, is there? Would you like to present any further arguments or exhibits to the court at this time?
Yes, I would. About halfway into the film, we are at the point that we are given. We've been tested as far as how much we can endure, as far as the physical torture of this character, the inhumane things that are no doubt befalling him at this point, and we are desperate for a reprieve. Kevin Smith does give us that, but again, it is the ultimate bait and switch, because we are introduced to one of the most just repulsive caricatures. And Johnny Depp's portrayal of Guy Laplante it's kind of like if Inspector Clouseau came out of the film Nothing But Trouble, and he's just this sort of grotesque, sort of cross-eyed, like warped kind of Bakshi, like monstrosity, scarfing down Gimli burgers, and is just is this sort of grotesque caricature, just giving us this sort of Esperanto French accent that sort of careens back and forth at his own will and whim, and it was that one scene that just lets us that just forces us to sit there as he just just sort of rants back and forth, maybe on script, maybe not, and it's just this torturous. I mean, if we thought that watching a man get dismembered and turn into a monstrous form in specific detail was torturous, this made me want to go back and watch him, let's see him remove his testicles, let's see him do any specific grotesque surgical move you want, just get me the fuck away from this monster, and it's so that element in and of itself, that it excuses this caricature in this sort of real environment, and then gives us this grotesque caricatured performance. It just added insult to injury, and I wanted to vomit.
All right, Mr. Howard, you are on thin ice. This court has a very high tolerance for cartoony accents.
I don't know what you're talking about, sir.
Oh, well, no, not you. That's your real voice, bailiff.
Of course.
Mr. Rodriguez, would you like to respond to the character of Johnny Depp plays in this? A very polarized character indeed.
I will say, first of all, that I think he would be honored that you called him a Bakshi monstrosity.
Fair enough.
So, yeah, ultimately, the strangest thing about Tusk is Guy Lapointe. What to be done about Guy Lapointe? So he's kind of the point, the nexus point of the movie, where either you're with it or you're not. Where it kind of becomes, you could argue that up until the point that Johnny Depp shows up, it is a relatively straightforward, if not non-linear, kind of horror movie. Or at least a psychological thriller, and then at that point it becomes like an experimental comedy. But there is something so bizarre, and the word that I used earlier, inadvisable about it, that I find absolutely captivating. That is just this strange confluence of 4 different movies intersected, sewn together like the skin of a walrus suit, and just stitched into this patchwork of human misery. Just this lovely thing. And if you're not on board with him, I can understand, it would probably make you want to vomit. But if you're on board and you follow and you just go with it, I think that you're in for something that you're not going to get at the movies. You're just, especially now, today, we are obsessed with brands. We're obsessed with numbers in titles. We don't like these strange detours. I can't justify it and say that it was a great idea or that it makes narrative sense, but it was fucking crazy. And I like fucking crazy.
All right, the jury's going to have a lot to chew on with Guy here. Mr. Howard, would you like any other points you'd like to bring up in regards to Guy or Johnny Depp?
All I can say is, again, that to simply say I liked it because it's crazy, again, just opens the Pandora's box for anything. And it's like, well, yes, but yes, it was. Was it crazy? Yes. Was it inadvisable? Yes. Was it bizarre? Yes. Did it work? Absolutely not. And that is the element that's the thing that we can't overlook, is how does it how, other than being crazy, how does it serve the story? How does it serve this, the form, other than the fact that this is crazy and anything goes, and there has to be some sort of barrier, some sort of dividing line between what is effective and what is not, and this is definitely on the side of not.
But if it's just a jumble of ideas, and if it's a jumble of wanting to put everything you possibly can into a film, what really is the dividing line? What does a dividing line mean in that instance?
I've been trying to figure that out watching this film, and again, that's the problem, is there is no dividing line. He can set up these things and take no responsibility for them. He can give us all of these things and then walk away and say it was all a joke, and say, well, this is what my podcast audience wanted. And there's really no sense of responsibility as the filmmaker. He's just basically saying, anything goes. This is a good idea because I wanted to see Johnny Depp do a funny accent, whether or not you like funny accents.
Okay, I want to use a comparison, just for my own edification, and because I think it might help my case.
Form of an objection, please, Mr. Rodriguez.
Objection. I want to use a comparison.
Sustained.
Thank you. So, David Lynch's Twin Peaks: The Return came out in 2017. 18 hours of just pure Lynch heroin straight from the needle. Generally regarded as possibly the greatest film of the last maybe 5 years. Like, directors like Jim Jarmusch have recognized it as such. I believe it was the LA Critics Society. It's generally regarded as such. So, David Lynch's return to Twin Peaks, not only is it transcendent and beautiful and meaningful and everything that you would want not only television but cinema to be, but it's also frustrating, boring, insane, completely random, goes nowhere at times. There's an entire scene where somebody sweeps up a bar floor as Booker T and the MG's Green Onions plays in the background. Now, nothing is happening in the frame. It's just somebody sweeping a floor. And it's the most captivating thing I've seen in, I don't know, maybe 10 years. Now, what does that mean? Why is that there? If you ask David Lynch, he'd tell you, I don't know, what do you think it means? Now, you might say that's not a good answer, or you might even say that's not an answer at all. But I don't think he owes you that answer. I don't think Kevin Smith needs to say, you know what, here's why Guy Lapointe is in the movie. Here's why A goes to B, B goes to C, C goes to, I don't know, X. A movie's a movie. If it feels right to the director, he should do it. That's all.
I will only say I see your point. I see the point that you're making. However, I think in the case of David Lynch, he establishes a world. He makes a promise to a certain kind of style, to a certain kind of logic, and stays true to that promise from beginning to end. It is a promise made from the beginning that allows that all these other things will happen. That the flow of reality will take different turns. Will take loop-de-loos and whatnot. I think in this case, this is Kevin Smith gives us a premise, and then then drops the floor the floor from it. There is nothing. It's more. It's not an understanding of form. It's not a respect of the form. It's just a sort of a whatever I feel like, and it's not. There isn't a world that is established. It's basically, this is the film that I want to make. Oh, and this is what I want to do now. Whatever. And he hasn't given himself the framework to make those kind of decisions that David Lynch would.
And wouldn't you say, Mr. Howard, based on your previous arguments, it goes to a matter of ownership? I think we would say David Lynch is willing to own something like Twin Peaks in a way that, given Kevin Smith's end credits, is not willing to own Tusk. Would you say that's fair?
I would say that is absolutely fair, yes.
All right. You can say that as your own point, as a matter for the record.
Yes, I would say that it comes down to a matter of ownership. That you look at an auteur like David Lynch, who is owning the points he's making in his film, whereas Kevin Smith is not. He's dropping it and then kind of sheepishly walking away. Fascinating
part of this conversation. A lot for the jury to take in. Mr. Howard, the floor is still yours if you'd like to bring any other points up.
No, Your Honor. In this case, the defense rests.
Very good.
The prosecution.
You would be the prosecution.
Rests.
You can't rest Mr. Rodriguez. That would be a great way to win. Yeah. If he had to know.
Yes.
Mr.
No. That
Rodriguez?
would. Yes. Yes.
It's okay. We're pretty late. It's a fun court. We like having fun.
Mr. Fun Rodriguez, court. I like fun court.
Absolutely, right? It's a good time. Mr. Rodriguez, you may now present your case.
We've addressed most of my arguments, so I'll condense it into one kind of greatest hits package, if you will. This, you can argue that, and the prosecution has, that it's creatively stagnant, but this is, beat for beat, the most creatively, in terms of visuals and in terms of aesthetics, the most creatively assembled film that Kevin Smith has ever made. If you just look at it on a score level, the music by Christopher Young is basically, if I had to try and compare it to something, I would call it like the music from Sicario, but composed with throat singers. And you have the cinematography is by James Laxton, who did the last two Barry Jenkins films, Moonlight and If Beale Street Could Talk. And there is actual atmosphere in this film. If you go back to Clerks, where the entire visual aesthetic is two people standing behind a counter, wide shot. Okay, say your lines. Okay, you said that. Okay, cut. All right, over the shoulder. All right, cut. Now there is like depth of frame. There's an entire scene that's set in I guess it's the dining room of the mansion that Michael Parks' character lives at, and it's Justin Long in a wheelchair, drugged up because he's just had his leg amputated, and sitting at one end of this very, very long Citizen Kane-esque table. I'm not comparing the movie to Citizen Kane. Sorry, don't crucify me for that. I'm just saying it's a long table. He's sitting at the very end of the long table, and at the other end is Michael Parks, and he's kind of taunting him, but the entire time he's switching angles so that you're seeing the width of the table in different ways, and you're going behind their shoulders, alternating so that sometimes it's a dirty frame, so you see somebody's shoulder out of focus, and it throws off your sense of balance, and it actually presents something that makes me think, okay, well, if he was actually given a script of a legitimate horror movie, he could shoot the shit out of it. If he actually wanted to make a movie, he could do it.
But he didn't.
Well, that's what the argument is being made on the prosecution side, but I think that visually, there is so much growth in this film. This is something that he would have never done 20 years ago, and I'm glad he was challenged to do something like this, because it shows that he actually does have a visual acumen, that when pushed against a wall, or when he pushes himself against a wall, he's actually capable of making something that's visually dynamic. And Tusk is certainly visually dynamic.
I'm not going
Mr.
to.
Howard, would you like to rebut any of the points made about the visual dynamicism?
I will. I will not dispute the technical prowess of the film, or the evolution of that's evident in Kevin Smith's visual eye. My main argument is the purpose that they serve and the means to which those things are used. Again, in many scenes he beautifully builds tension, but again, none of that is actually serves the film in the end if it's all kind of slap happily dashed away in the final frames. Any of that technical prowess, could be used beautifully in with a better framework, with a better story. But Kevin Smith wasn't interested in that, and so yes, I applaud his technical prowess and would love to see him use it to better means, but that has yet to be seen.
My point was ultimately not disputed. The defense rests.
Classic Ryan Rodriguez for you, ladies and gentlemen. All right. We have heard the arguments from the prosecution. We've heard the arguments from the defense. At this point, Mr. Howard, you can present your closing statement.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Kevin Smith aims to show us the beast within ourselves, but also shows us the one inside himself, an impish, sanguinary trickster who beats his subjects with their own sack of shit, then rips it open and basks in the contents like piñata prizes. He gives us subjects beyond redemption and invites us to take pleasure in their slow, sadistic undoing. If you reveal monsters just to prod them and watch them squirm, you're not vanquishing ugliness, but spreading it. And Tusk spreads it thick, scraping the jar and licking the knife. If you excuse this film, you too lick that knife. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Rodriguez, your closing statement, if you please.
Love it or hate it, Tusk is unique in the history of cinema. No other narrative film has ever been born out of a weed-soaked, improvised podcast conversation. Sure, It's a Wonderful Life was born out of Frank Capra reading a greeting card with a friend on mescaline, but that was 80 years ago. The experience is now in the public domain and ready to be reinterpreted. While we have debated the relative worth of Tusk, and it was spirited and most certainly sexy, all that the jury needs to remember is this. This is the weirdest fucking movie we have ever covered in this court by a wide margin. So weird, it is practically transcendent, and weird is desperately needed these days. It's also entirely genuine. Nothing Kevin Smith did here was done to appeal to a pre-sold market or a studio mandate, and he grew as a visual artist in the process. Whether it was an experience that you want to remember or not, you will remember the movie about Michael Parks turning a podcaster into a walrus. When your future children ask you, Dada, what's the cinematic experience you'll never forget? You'll sigh the deepest sigh and say, #walrus yes. Son or daughter. #walrus yes. A film that it can imprint itself onto your hippocampus for eternity is doing something right. If you can acquit Jason Takes Manhattan, the 8th movie about nothing in a series that does almost nothing, simply for having a scene in which a mute slasher boxes a high schooler's head off, this is a no-brainer. May I remind you, a podcaster is chopped up and stuffed into a walrus suit made of human skin. If you vote anything but not guilty, the sheer absence of continuity of logic will tear a hole in the space-time continuum, endangering the multiverse as we know it. Gentlemen, if you care about the delicate fabric that separates our dimension from the likes of Earth 2, where they have outlawed movie court podcasts, vote not guilty. Walrus,
Very good, Mr. Rodriguez. Though the jury is instructed to remember that Jason Takes Manhattan is a good movie. All right, jury, you have heard the arguments before this court today, and it is now up to you to render your decision. The bailiff will now lead you into the deliberation chamber.
After I have my donuts, it's over there. Wow. Well, I really don't want to be blamed for ripping a hole in the space-time continuum. We must tread lightly here. Mr. Maynard, what did you think of this?
So I thought the discussions were spirited, and they did talk. It seemed like they talked a lot about intention of the movie, and I didn't take it. It's hard for me to know how serious Smith was taking this movie. Like, I don't know. It's hard to say.
I know exactly what you mean, except those end credits. What do you think about those end credits?
They were really mad at the end credits, and to me, the end credits did not go like, I think the words were na 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 na, right in your face, and it's not like it was telling you, this whole movie was nothing but a joke. To me, the end credits was just letting you know that the origin of this movie is from this podcast conversation. It actually gives you the number of the podcast, so you can go listen to it to sort of understand where this idea came from.
Does it require listening for understanding this movie, in other words? Or?
I don't think it's required listening, but if you want to understand the origin of the idea, then you can listen to the episode. And that's a unique thing. Very rarely is there a recorded conversation of a movie's genesis available for the public to listen to. Like we said, except for Frank Capra on Mescaline, which we discussed. But as far as the seriousness of it, I think the defense called it genuine. And I don't know if the movie's point is genuine. To me, it's a satire. It's a satire of body horror. It's how over-exaggerated can we make our body horror to sort of point out the ridiculousness of body horror. And it seemed like everybody but Michael Parks was in on the joke. Because to me, Parks is incredibly sincere. His character's ludicrous, but he's incredibly sincere. And he definitely was the performance that really elevated this film to me.
Yeah, I agree. Like when it was like in the first half of the film and like he was like kind of front and center that way, I didn't hate the film. It was like a solid 3 stars for me. It was like only later that it started to drop and drop and drop. The more it seemed like I don't know if being made fun of is the right word, but I didn't feel like I was in on the story or the joke.
I never felt like the movie was laughing at me. I thought, like most satire, the movie was laughing at the genre it was sort of spoofing.
Ben, can you give us an example of what you mean? Like, what happened in the movie where, like, that you said, "Well, that I don't get," and or like that?
I think
maybe not insulting is the right word, but like, what this feeling that you had, like, what's the scene that like?
I think it was where the defense said it was, where Johnny Depp shows up. It's at this point that we get this character that's not at all like anything that happened before it, and this is clearly. Satire wasn't what came to my mind. It was more just like lame comedy, like sketch comedy almost, with his rolling the hamburgers out on the restaurant table and things like that.
I didn't like Depp when he initially entered the movie, but I warmed up to him once he gets into the scene with Michael Parks. That little scene where they kind of do, I can't even really call it a tete, right? But yeah, I mean, to me, Depp was a very shallow character. I mean, he's just there to be really ridiculous. He does have some banger funny lines. Like the crime scene photos are one fuck of a bummer. Like that made me laugh. Yeah, it's quotable. So Depp, to me, I warmed up to him. Once he just kind of becomes part of the story and he's not like the focus of that big diner scene, I liked him more. When he's
I might
just
agree with you there.
Yeah, when he's just handing out guns or stuff like that. Depp to me was brought in to give the background on the serial killer. Like, it was better to have him be silly. I guess is my point. It was better to have him be a comic relief character because at the end of the day, it is a Kevin Smith movie, and it is a comedy. It's not a straight horror, right? It's a satire. Horror, it's a comedy horror.
Like it was horror at first, and then it turned on us, and that's kind of where you start feeling betrayed, or at least I did.
I mean, I think if you walked into a Kevin Smith movie expecting a full horror movie, then you've made a mistake.
I did. I totally made a mistake. I took the movie on its face value. I plugged it in. I tried to, go in as blind as possible, knowing as little as I could about it, and just let the movie take me away. And it did take me away, and then it, like I said, turned its back on me. It like flipped the tables.
See, I think we did the same. We went in blind. We had no idea what this movie was going to be. I thought it was more Kafka-esque. I thought Justin Long was going to be transforming.
So did
into
I.
the
I actually
walrus.
thought that too.
Well,
And-
it was like a
I've
mental
ever
thing.
read about it. They always said Justin Long slowly transforms into a walrus. They didn't mention that.
Kind of did, technically.
Well, no, I mean that's true. Well, because the idea is to break him and make him think
Right.
a walrus, which is funny because the way we're talking about it, like in these serious tones, like, oh well, you break him, make him think he's a walrus, whereas Kevin Smith was doing it completely for laughs and giggles, which is it's hard to ignore.
To me,
with that end credits thing, and this is where I'm gonna just.
I think it's easy to ignore.
I'm gonna
No, let's see what Mr. Schlender.
Half of everybody got up and left. Don't tell me they sat all the way through.
How
the
many
song
movies
Tusk.
can you say that the end credits made you madder? It's
Why
gotta
are you even staying for the end credits, man? Like, get
Because
up,
everyone's
go
hogging
out,
up
do
the
something
bathroom at that
else.
point.
He put him there, and I want to support all the jobs that are being made. I want to know who
Liar.
the assistant was to Mr. Parks.
And sometimes there's, the Avengers eating falafel at the end of it, so it's worth it.
It's
there was a-
2014,
there
and
was
I don't
a-
know how
there
fully
was a
established that
post-credit-
was.
There was a post-credit scene with Johnny.
There was a post-credit scene.
No, but I want to speak to Mr. Howard's point because it's very salient to me. It's one of the reasons that I would be inclined to vote this movie bad, and that is intentionality, which I think is very important. And I think Kevin Smith has this fundamental insecurity about him when it comes to his filmmaking, when it comes to his kinds of films. Like you said, you hit the nail on the head. So you went into a Kevin Smith movie expecting this. So he has this idea of what a Kevin Smith.
He is a comedian. That's my point. He's a comedian. You shouldn't go in to one of his movies not expecting comedy.
No,
But sometimes Adam Sandler does Uncut Gems.
But here's the thing, though, with Kevin Smith, when you listen to the talks he's done with the Evening of Kevin Smith series, he talks about branching out and trying these different movies, but he always finds a way to fall back onto why something isn't his fault. Like when he talked about Zach and Miri make a porno, he goes, we tried to make an Apatow movie and we did Kevin Smith business. When he talks about Cop Out, he goes, I just wanted to make a movie my dad would like, and then Bruce Willis ended up being a jerk. He does seem to have trouble taking ownership when he ventures outside of his comfort zone. But in this movie, we see those glimpses of greatness that Ryan was talking about. We do see a well-crafted movie. And I think he was looking at it too hard and he blinked. He was afraid to commit to making something that was beyond just a Kevin Smith movie. I think he has a great movie in him and he's afraid to make it, and he wants to kind of keep it both ways. He wants to have one foot in, one foot out. So if Tusk was received very, very well, he could have stood up triumphantly and said, yes, these are the kind of movies I wanted to make. This is what Kevin Smith is all about. But it didn't happen, so he can fall back on saying, well, it was a Kevin Smith movie. We did Kevin Smith business. And
So you're saying he needed to go full walrus, man.
I
Should have gone full walrus.
Maybe not full walrus. Maybe this wasn't the right movie for it. But this movie, when you watch it and you listen to how Kevin Smith talks about his other movies that kind of step out of his comfort zone, I do think he wants to go for it. And Kevin Smith, I know you listen to this podcast. Go for it, dude. Just absolutely go for it. Just do your thing. Right? Don't worry about being like an Apatow movie. Don't worry about making a movie like your dad would like. Don't worry about making this weird hashtag kind of thing that you can cocoon your creativity in to protect yourself. Put yourself out there. Make the movie you can make. Make your great movie.
Kevin Smith's going to take us down, man.
No, because I believe in him. If I thought he couldn't do it, I wouldn't tell him to do it. You know what I mean? But he just needs to get over this insecurity that he has. And to his credit, he talks about at least. But I don't think that just to see it keep holding him back is very, very disappointing. And then at the end of Tusk, to just have him throw that in our face in that end credit scene, I can definitely see how people like Mr. Howard would leave that movie saying like, well, if you're not taking it seriously, if you're saying it's bad, like, why do I have
I don't think where are you getting that from? Like, he just played a clip
It's just the way that he's
from the
laughing about it.
podcast
Like,
at the end
because he's saying
because it is funny. Like, it's funny. I think mainly
saying,
because it's a walrus. But if
that's what
you
he
could
said.
take this movie and put any other animal in the walrus's place, and at the end of the day, it's about a serial killer who is stripping the humanity from his victims by turning them into animals, and like that, he could be turning them into peacocks, into giraffes, whatever. He happens to turn them into walruses, maybe because that's one of the more visually horrible things to turn into. You know, I haven't heard the podcast. Maybe they throw out some other animals they could do, and Smith's finally like walrus, and it makes them crack up. And again, it is a satire because it's about taking that body horror to the extreme. It's about taking that human centipede idea and taking it too far. So when he played the podcast clip at the end, I'm not saying I loved it, but it didn't undermine the entire movie to me like it seemed to for some of you guys. Like
No, let me be clear. I don't think it undermined the mood, but I could see how that argument could be made because of the way he's laughing at it. He's laughing at the joke he says, because he's still a walrus. He throws out those emotional attachments that Mr. Howard was mentioning during his argumentation that Mr. Rodriguez had brought up. He throws those all away because he ends it by just saying the joke is he's still a walrus. He's not saying any deeper meaning to it. But
I don't think you're supposed to sit through the climax of this movie taking it dead serious. Anyway, and I don't think that's a cop-out. I think that is the beauty of the movie, is like it's both funny and really disturbing. And I don't think any of the Kevin Smith style humor in this movie is all that funny. Like I've said, like, if you're 18 years old, I can't imagine not liking Kevin Smith. But if you're 30 years old, I can't imagine liking him. Like, it's an immature sense of humor. So like, I didn't like any of the Nazi party jokes that it makes. I didn't like, a lot of, it's just very Smith-like stuff. I didn't like a lot of that, but the overall concept of the man turning into a walrus was so ridiculous. It was amusing. It was funny to me. And that was the charm of the movie. If this movie was the same movie, totally straight-faced, no humor at all, not a satire, I'd call it guilty right now. Like, no, that's ridiculous and stupid. But because it's tongue-in-cheek, that's the charm of it for me.
Would you say, like, Human Centipede is bad then? Because that's an analogous movie that plays it straight.
Yeah, I wouldn't watch Human Centipede again, and I'd watch Tusk again.
Well, that's definitely fair and consistent. Ben, you're the foreman. Do you want to take a vote? What should we do?
Okay.
I'd like to hear some more thoughts from Ben.
The required marijuana handout that they probably gave out in theaters to fully enjoy this movie. So without that, I'd have to go guilty. It was captivating, I agree, but so is a train wreck.
I didn't see it as a train wreck like that. I didn't see. To me, this is not a so bad it's entertaining type movie at all. I went in with extremely low expectations. I was like not looking forward to seeing this at all. And I cringed a lot in the first 15 minutes when it's very Kevin Smithy. But then when we get to the house, we meet Michael Parks. The plot slowly unravels. And then to the point where like the walrus is sort of shown early. And you realize that really the rest of this movie is him reprogramming Justin Long to act and behave like a walrus. That's when it really went way over the fucking top and was really wild and weird and disturbing. And that's what else is important about a horror movie. To me, okay, a horror movie's got to succeed in scaring me or disturbing me. This disturbed me. A comedy has to succeed in making me laugh. This made me laugh. It disturbed me in one moment and then made me laugh in the next. And to me, that was very successful for me. So I'm giving it not guilty.
You are our tiebreaker, Mr. Schlender.
Oh, I don't think anyone's going to like where this is going. Because I actually have to recuse myself because I voted Walrus. Yes. No, I'm kidding. I think Robb made a lot of good points, and I basically agree with everything he said. I find body horror pretty disturbing no matter what, even if it's like really low budget stuff, like unnecessary surgery that gets me. That's always going to make my stomach flip. I'm just, we talked about in an episode that everyone should listen to, the night of the Return of the Living Dead 2. I believe that was the third episode we did. That's something I mentioned. It's just that kind of gross out stuff It just kind of gets me. So if everyone listens to that episode, you'll hear my thoughts on like gross out stuff. So, but the comedy was there for me. Like, I thought Johnny Depp was hilarious from the jump. I mean, like, I thought I liked him at the beginning, like in the diner. Like, he's like, get close, you know. And everything he did, I just thought was hilarious. I was very
one fuck of a bummer.
Yeah, one fuck of a bummer. I mean, Maynard and I might have woken up the neighbors. We laughed at that line. But my point is, I was very surprised to go on to read that like so many people hated Johnny Depp. I was like, oh wow, I thought everyone was going to say this movie sucked except for Johnny Depp. I'm highly critical of Kevin Smith because I think there's better stuff in there. I think he's talented enough to do it. He just has to commit to do it. But I can't sit here today in this court with the evidence presented in my own two eyes and say that this is a bad movie. You know, it was kind of scary when it needed to be, and it was hilarious when it needed to be. And I gotta say, I'm really shocked because I was going into this thinking it was going to be terrible. So I'm voting not guilty, but I totally understand how people would vote this one guilty. Though this one, it doesn't confuse me at all. Like, I get it. But
I will accept your vote if you can tell me one thing.
Yes, sir.
Why didn't he just get a real walrus?
Because that paper trail would be enormous. And the idea was he needed the walrus to understand his pain. And a human can understand the way a walrus can't. So when he can talk to and look into the human eyes of his victims and know that they understand what he's saying, that's important to him. And he's freaking crazy. It's like, you know, like, that's part of the satire. He's crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
we talked about this, Ben. Like, the practicality of keeping a real walrus is, one, you're either getting it from the wild, which means you're trafficking it in, and you're going to get a ton of attention, or you're going to steal it from a zoo, and it's the same problem, you know. And you need to give it thousands of pounds of fish to keep it alive. It's going to be very expensive. Whereas a human, apparently you can give him like one raw fish and he'll last a few days on that because he's just in like an inflated suit. And a person goes missing and nobody really blinks an eye. A walrus goes missing, there is an investigation.
All right, follow-up question. What about going full walrus is such a mental break that a guy can't come back from that?
I think we were all expecting him to shoot him at the end and just put him out of the misery, because I think that's what we would want. Like, I wouldn't want to be the walrus creature man thing anymore. Like, shoot me right now. And I think that's kind of what's horrifying. He is continuing as a walrus. It's a little unbelievable. It's a stretch. It is I think anyone in their right mind would have somehow managed to convince someone to kill him, please kill me, but they don't. And that's almost more horrifying, is that he is going to go on as a walrus.
What body horror do people get to recover from anyway? I mean, that's just part of the genre too. Like The Fly, he doesn't get to recover. Human Centipede, it ends with them being found by the police. We don't know if they recover.
Spoiler, I haven't seen it.
There's a spoiler warning at the beginning.
Yeah, we spoil other fucking movies too. We spoil other fucking movies too.
Yeah, even the first Saw movie, when he cuts his own leg off and then leaves. I mean, so like, you just don't know what happens to people in body horror, and very rarely do they get their bodies back, and that's one of the reasons it's so
this one was mental.
Even if they pulled him out of the suit, he doesn't have his legs anymore. I mean, that's something.
Yeah, he's missing legs. His arms are fused together. He's got no tongue.
I think we have our verdict. We should probably.
And he's killed a man with his tusks too. Like, he may not come back from that.
All right, you're right. We got our verdict. Let's get out and deliver it.
Gentlemen of the jury, have you reached your verdict?
Ashamedly we have, Your Honor, but there will be no tearing of the space-time continuum today because we find the film not guilty.
All right!
The verdict is so rendered. If you look under your chairs, you will each find an eighth of marijuana. I sentence all of us to get good and high and improvise our own horror movie script, which some other podcast can try at a later date. Court is adjourned.
Way ahead of you, Judge.
I am soaking in this marijuana.
I'd like mine in edible form, please.
This is Gianni Manicotti from the Gabagoo Gazette, reporting to you live from outside the Reels of Justice. Mr. Howard, would you care to share your thoughts on the jury's verdict?
Well, this is not a day, the kind of day I look forward to in my career, but it is inevitable, and it is indicative of the fight that we have in this court, in my position to ahead of us. It's a long road of defending the rights of filmmakers to tell real stories and not get high and decide to make up stories on the spot. So in the meantime, I'm going to go home and cry into the broad shoulder of my walrus companion.
Thank you. And here comes Mr. Rodriguez. Hey, could we get a word on how you feel about today's verdict?
I appreciate the victory, but I do believe you're creating a monster. I'm getting high on the victory and also on mescaline.
Oh, just like Frank Capra, one of my favorites. Thank you very much. Bada bang! That's all we have time for from the courthouse today. Let's go back to the studio for post-trial analysis. You know what I'm saying? Wow, that's going to be one of the most offensive characters we've ever had on the show.
I'm glad it's not the Taylor. I'm glad you topped me.
What was that?
Galen, you did a great job, man. And I totally get where you're coming from. I get why people hate this movie. I get why people don't like it. I really do. I don't think you're wrong. You know, that's what's so crazy about this movie. Like I'm very sympathetic to what you're saying.
Yeah.
The only thing I could see is like the Johnny Depp character. I could see where he's really kind of dropping the guard and going, well, this is a comedy. But I think up till then, or without that character, it's almost too genuinely horrifying.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's one that goes so over the edge and then tries to back away, and it's like, well, it's too late at that point. But there were definitely points from the defense that I was like, well, I mean, yes, I mean, Kevin Smith is a provocative filmmaker, and this was, I mean, I'll confess, this was a film I was very intrigued about, and I was very much, kind of anticipating this film, and it's, because it is such a bizarre premise, but it's just the results. I had very strong opinions about it.
And I do want to clarify that I don't believe most of what I said.
You're a monster, Ryan. I know. Ryan was complaining about having to do this movie all week, and that's why I think made me apprehensive about watching it. And then I watched it, and I'm like, oh, this is super defensible. I mean, it's a satire.
Yeah, but what really hurt my heart was making that comparison to Twin Peaks. I shouldn't have done that. I'm better than that.
That was a low blow.
Well, I was desperate in that moment, and
wow.
Yeah, I know. I'm better than that.
Maybe why I fed Galen that argument, because I'm like, we can't let this stand.
No,
I mean, I agree. This movie was a lot more interesting than Twin Peaks. I agree. Twin Peaks didn't have a walrus monster at all. All right.
I hope
you're happy.
Yeah, but in closing, of course, this movie did have a podcaster who was kidnapped and tortured, and we do want to just say for the record, you should not kidnap any of the podcasters on this podcast and sexually torture them.
Unless you're Karen Gillan.
For the record, especially Ryan. Don't kidnap Ryan and sexually torture him. I don't want to have to repeat myself again.
You don't have to. It's in the disclaimer at the beginning of the show.
That's true. Please do not kidnap Ryan. And
shame on me. Fool me twice.
Shame on everyone else. So, Galen, what's been keeping you busy lately in this on these unprecedented times?
Yes, absolutely. Well, it really varies day to day, week to week. I proudly say I've been occupying my time with broad swatches of nothing, and but also there's lots of fun little things here and there. I've been writing quite a bit. I've been doing a lot of podcasts, like this one, and then
But we're the best one, right?
by far, and yeah,
Thank you.
Yes, and yeah, and as far as anything out there anything out there that people can see, I was recently in a music video for the electro pop duo Disclosure, where I play a sentient sperm.
Ooh,
Oh, okay.
that sounds like a fun thing to have in your IMDb.
Absolutely. So
the movie where a guy gets turned into a walrus is too much, but you'll go play a sentient sperm.
Hey, I mean, I would. I mean, now that the veil is drawn, I mean, like I would, you pay me enough, I will happily be a man turned walrus, but I won't step back and defend it.
Do you think Justin Long actually was in that walrus suit for the shots, or they got like some stuntman to do it?
I mean,
you can only see his eyes.
No, he was. He was. I listened to the commentary.
Wow, he actually was in it, like screaming with no tongue.
That's dedication. Yes.
Wow.
Yes, they cut out his tongue for the performance, and they glued it back.
Well, he's a method actor, obviously.
He's so method.
Come to think of it, I haven't seen him in any film since then.
Well, it probably means something. So, Galen, do you have a recommendation that our viewers should check out? It is the month of October, so we're hoping you will give us a horror movie or a scary movie for a recommendation.
Well, I can give a similarly themed. I can give a creature feature of and like
Great.
this one, a very off-center creature feature. I recently saw that a micro-budget independent film called The Lake Michigan Monster, which is just a fantastic sort of it's sea shanty creature feature by way of Guy Madden, and it was made for like practically no money, and just has this gleeful silliness and kind of sense of invention about it, and it's absolutely it just kind of careens from one scene to the next, broad and stylized, but grounded performances. It's just an absolute hoot from start to finish. I would highly recommend.
I'm seeing the description says the combined spirits of H.P. Lovecraft, early Sam Raimi, and Mystery Science Theater 3000 inhabit this action-packed tale of nautical daring-do and monster mayhem. That sounds right up our alley.
It looks
really
so
fun.
good. I can't wait to see it.
Oh, it's so much fun. Yeah, I think you can stream it on the on the Arrow video app. It's yeah.
Oh, nice.
I don't think it's on DVD yet, but it's fantastic.
Awesome. Who is our judge for today? Dylan. What have you got for a suggestion?
Can you believe it? So, as we all know, the best guest we've ever had on this podcast is Galen Howard.
Yes.
But we've had a couple other pretty fantastic guests too, including but not limited to Liesl Hansen and Frank Dietz, and those two were in a scary movie together called Tales of Halloween. It came out in 2015. Mm-hmm. It's an anthology movie, so it's a bunch of little stories, and it has a couple friends of the podcast in it. So if you need a scary movie to watch and you love Reels of Justice and you want to support the people who've been on it, there you go. Bada bing.
How was the answer? Yes to all of your questions.
Oh boy, bada bing.
Absolutely. Ben, what have you got?
I'm going to recommend one of my favorite Takashi Miike films that I've seen. I haven't seen all of his 100-plus film library. That is Audition. Do yourself a favor and go in as blind as possible. Try not to even see the poster if you can. There are elements of Tusk that reminded me of this film a bit, with the body horror aspect and the tonal shift in the last section, because the majority of the film is straight drama before turning into horror in its third act, which in my opinion is one of the most effective ways to deliver emotional scares. So check it out.
You know, I'm going to share that quote about not seeing the poster with the poster attached on social media, right?
Put a big box over most of it. Like, just keep like the title.
I will not. Ryan, what have you got for me?
Well, in honor of the occasion, I have two. One is spooky and the other is not. The first, the non-spooky one, is the best thing that Kevin Smith ever made, something that we talk about frequently off air, Clerks, the animated series,
Yes.
which is just the absolute greatest thing ever. It's streaming on Hoopla, whatever the fuck that is. So go find it and stream it for free.
I'm going to tell you, buy the DVD. It's got to
Yes.
still be out there. Just buy Clerks, the animated series on DVD. It's 6 episodes. You're going to watch them multiple times anyway because it's a brilliant show. Genius.
Yeah, I believe it's 99 cents on Amazon right now. So
we live in the timeline where this is
my spooky recommendation is a movie from 1981 called Possession that I believe is streaming on Shudder right now, about a government agent played by Sam Neill who returns home from a mission to find out that his wife has left him and something may be going horribly wrong. And it's a psychological thriller. It's a horror movie. It is like 18 different things in one, and it has one of the most terrifying scenes that I've ever seen in a movie that involves Sam Neill and an electric carving knife. That is all I'm going to say. Possession from 1981. I love it.
Pretty creepy.
I'm scared already.
Absolutely. I guess so. I'm the last one. I've got to recommend a movie. I'm going to recommend a movie called Black Sheep, which it's kind of a zombie movie, but it's about sheep, right? And when the protagonist gets bit by a sheep, he starts turning into one. So very similar in our horror vein of people who are turning into animals, although in this case, he literally is turning into an animal. And it's a really interesting sort of movie out of the zombie genre that really sort of plays with the rules, manages to be funny, but is obviously, it's tongue in cheek, but it still manages to succeed in being horrifying.
It's an Irish film, is that right?
I'm scared already.
It's one of those European countries.
I don't know if it's
there you go.
I think it's actually New Zealand. I think it's New Zealand.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, that's true.
They have more sheep than people and stuff. I think that's part of the horror.
Oh, that's cool.
That is scary.
I just remember the cover from Blockbuster.
Yes,
because I used to work.
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching it a lot when it came out. But it's a pretty strange movie that does succeed again in being funny and scary. And with that, Galen, thank you so much for coming on here and hanging out with us and arguing down this movie.
Thank you so much, you guys. This was exciting. This was heartbreaking, but ultimately fulfilling. Thank you.
Thank you. You did a wonderful job. It's just Ryan is brutal. He's ruthless. Ooh. He gets in there.
He sure did.
He goes for the
continuum. What could we do?
He works the rib.
Rodriguez.
Yep, Ryan the Razor Rodriguez.
So I have a new nickname every week.
Yes.
Okay.
Keep it up. And keep it up, and you'll keep earning nicknames.
I can't remember the other ones.
Yes, exactly. And with that, we are all out of show for this week, but we hope you'll join us next time as the Reels of Justice keep turning.
Later.
All right, everyone say goodbye in your spookiest voice. Goodbye.
Hello, ghost.
Please follow us on Twitter at Reels of Justice, Instagram Reels of Justice, and Facebook.com/Reels of Justice.